Baptist Memorial Healthcare is located both in urban and in rural communities. So we really feel a sense of duty to help people to understand the end-of-life directives and to simplify the process as much as possible. We began this work out of the Healthy Shelby initiative in 2013, but it has continued in many ways throughout our system, really, all over the footprint of West Tennessee. What we do is make sure that there are chaplains available and that we have information available so that we can help people get to advanced end-of-life directives and end-of-life care in a simplified process. We're picking up on data where we can make sure people can get it done without legal aid, where we don't have to have a notary, but you can simply sign the forms in the presence of witnesses and have that information on file. It helps with families making really good decisions at the end of life. They don't feel a burden, they don't feel the pressure, because this has been a conversation where we know people have really worked together. We're also working with other entities. I myself am a pastor in the community, and Baptist was instrumental in helping me. Even though I work at Baptist, they were instrumental in helping me to set up a Sunday school class. That Sunday school class in my church each quarter invites people and families in together so we can sit down and have this conversation. When we do it in the context of our faith, it's a lot easier to accept and to communicate it as a part of the faith journey and not so much as an end-of-life isolated journey, but as a part of life. Before we do anything, you mind if I pray? Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we've had to gather today and for all that has been said. So many personal and transparent moments have occurred, and I pray that you continue to heal those whom have presented and poured out from their own experiences. Now, dear Lord, I also pray for those who help others through their experiences, because oftentimes while they are in the business of comforting others, there is a question of who comforts them. Bless us all now in the name of Christ and with respect to the faith of all. Amen. There's a passage of scripture in the book of Job, in Job chapter 4, and it says something very powerful. It says, your words have upheld others. Your conversations have given strength to others. But now this thing has come upon you. And so for me, the experience was going from encourager and caregiver and comforter to needing to be comforted and needing to receive that care. And so it brought a different level of sensitivity to me. Over the 20 years of pastoral ministry that I've shared at the First Baptist Church at Broad Avenue, it has been an enlightening experience that my sensitivities have increased year after year. And I want to share this with you, and I want to say it largely with respect to all that are in the room. I speak largely from a community of color where there are people who have some other disparities that they face. And so two words that I have not heard and I'd like to introduce to us are the economic and the emotional impact of dealing with grief on a consistent basis in some of our communities, as well as the economic impact that people often don't talk about. As a pastor, one of the challenges that I had to do was decide, how do we really have a holistic approach to this, or congregational care that considers all of these things and not just, hey, your loved one is dying, they're going to live eternally with the Lord if their soul is saved, close this chapter and let's move on to the next thing. Because all too often what we will do, and what has been known to be done in many places, is that we have a wonderful celebration of life, whether that's around a memorial service, a funeral, a repast, whatever it is. We, greet people. We give a great conversation about the afterlife, a wonderful sermon. 3 days off from work, 7 days now, and we say, get up and get back to normal. That's not a reality. My mother and father divorced because of several reasons, but I'll tell you what I believe some of them were. As children, one of my older brothers was killed by violence. They never healed from it. We lost another brother by violence in the inner city, shot in the back. And 2 times I've eulogized my own family, my own brothers. One of my other brothers said to me, when you eulogize me, I said, stop. This is not my job. I don't want to do it. Because they just feel as if you're the pastor. This is your job. This is what you're supposed to do. I don't think my family ever healed because we did not have a church, we did not have a congregation, we did not have a system of care, there was no Stephen Ministry program. There were no conversations like this taking place, especially in urban environments where the incident of violent deaths, sudden deaths, are a little bit higher than in other places. And so my family, as a result, began to fall apart because we had this silence. We did not speak about what happened to Barry and what happened to Harold, my two brothers. And so as a result, we saw pain and separation between my parents. Later in life, they would come to live together in my home, both at a point and place where they needed care. I realized that when they came back, it was for healing purposes, not just for them, but for the rest of the family. You see, they were captive. They had to speak to each other. They lived in the same house, and both of them were on walkers. They couldn't drive. They couldn't get away from each other. But here's what happened. When my father was diagnosed with leukemia, stage 4, my dad thought he had a sore ankle. He had broken his ankle a couple times. He went to the hospital a few times to get checked out, and they said, well, maybe it's just soreness from your ankle. He had leukemia. Misdiagnosed at least 2 or 3 times. Had leukemia, stage 4. Everything else was fine. When they finally started running blood tests, they said something else wrong here. Transferred him to the hospital where I provide care, or I work as an administrator because he was going to another hospital. I won't call their name. And so while we were there, the doctor comes in and he tells us all of these things. And he said it right in front of my dad. And I'm saying, Dad, did you understand what he said? The doctor said, did you understand me, Mr. Norman? And he looked at me. He said, did you understand him, Mr. Norman? I said, yes, sir, I understood him. I said, but did you understand him? He said, well, if you understood him, that's all that matters to me. The doctor left the room, and I looked at my dad. I said, so how are you? He said, I'm fine. He was eating Haagen-Dazs ice cream. He didn't like Turner. He didn't like Breyers. He only liked Haagen-Dazs. They didn't serve Haagen-Dazs in my hospital, but how he convinced the nurse to bring it in, I still don't know. And so he's eating his ice cream, and I said, Dad, how are you? He said, I'm good. I said, how's your soul? He said, you tell me. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're my pastor. Everything I know about Jesus, you told me. He said, so how am I? I said, well, you're going to be pretty good. But that's when it hit me, the gravity of how much people depend on us at the end of life. The things that may or may not be clear to them, they want to know if they got it right. I've had people who were as old as 90 years of age come from the Methodist Church. This is not anything against my good friends at the Methodist Church. But they said to me, would you baptize me? And I said, why? They said, I grew up Methodist and I wasn't baptized. I said, it's not required. They said, I just want to make sure I got it right. Literally. They said, I just want to make sure that I got it right. And they just wanting to be assured or needing whatever level of assurance that they needed. And so end of life is a very, very serious conversation. And the whole idea about how communities of faith, how care providers connect around this conversation is extremely important. For years we've existed in silos. It's been the hospital and the chaplain. It's been the church and the celebration of life. And then it's been the health community that's different over here a little bit from the hospital in the sense that the county, the government, and all the providers here. But now we're bringing it together to say, what is the healthiness of this conversation? What is the value of us all having this conversation in the same setting? And so as I thought about it toward the end of life with both of my parents, I realized that it wasn't just me, the pastor. It wasn't just me, the healthcare administrator. I had 4 children who lived in the house. And they were a part of the conversation as well. You see, while they saw Dad taking care of Mom and Dad, of his mom and dad, I was teaching them how to provide care for me. And I was also giving them space to begin the healing process while both of their grandparents were alive. I asked them to tell me what your thoughts and wishes are. What do you hope to see? Each of my children wrote a note. They said, here's what we would love to see happen. We would love to see grandmother have her own choices in picking out her clothes. Now, mind you, my mother at 87 years of age now still thought she was about 37. So it was nothing for her to have on a dress about as short as this one right here. and some mismatched socks and whatever it was, and she wanted to go out of the house. And then at 87, get this, my mother with this beautiful silver hair decided she wanted to get weave. Wrapped it up in a bun and put it on top of her head. And I said, Mom, we can't get that. And my daughter said, let her get what she wants. It's more important that she's happy. Diamonds on her fingernails, that blew me away. But she had seen one of my daughters with a little, something on her fingernails. And then they started wearing 4 colors and 1 odd color on this fingernail. It's a new trend now. So she wanted all of that towards the end of life. It was her choice. It was her decision. She wanted to do these things, and not only did it make her happy, it made her granddaughters happy. 2 grandsons, her 2 grandsons that live in the house, or that came back to the house to live. It's another story when I thought I was an empty nester. You're never an empty nester, by the way. So the 2 sons who come back home are care providers with me. And so at that particular point in time, it was important to them that there was always someone there with her because they never wanted her to fall, to hurt herself, or to be left unattended. So I said, okay, guys, how do we work that? I saw 2 men, young men in their 20s, give up their complete social lives and tell their young girlfriends that they were dating at the time, a part of what I do on weekends and a part of what I do in the evenings, rotate my schedule so somebody can be at home with my grandmother. I saw them step up. I saw them really get involved. So by making it a conversation with the family and enlarging the conversation outside of the individual and the care provider, it really makes everybody a partner in the situation. And then there were some things that we wanted to do with our church. My mother had some very specific things that she wanted to see done at her celebration of life. She told the people in her Sunday school class exactly what to wear. She said, look, I want all you all to wear, she told them about some little flowers or something and all this. And there was all these nice little old ladies with all these flowers. Here's the problem. She didn't tell them how we were going to pay for them. And so at the end, guess what? I had to buy all of those flowers. And I had to hear her values. I had to know what was important, and I had to make that a part of this plan of care. Because the plan of care is not just about what to do as far as do I want a feeding tube or do I want this, but it's a plan of care. It's a plan of how do I care for you so that you find peace in this transition that is occurring towards here, the end of life. Another very valuable story, and I'll share some things with you here. This was just my final one. At the very end, there was a very obvious onset of dementia, Alzheimer's, beginning to be progressive with the palsy and the Parkinson's that was there. And so as this begins to expand, one clear Memorial Day, she says to me, get flowers that we may take them and put them on my mother and father's grave. I said, sure. So I stopped to get 2 flowers. She then had my son to call me back and say, get more, because I want to do everybody's grave. And I said, okay, here's the problem. I don't know where everybody's grave is. And I'm in the car with a lady who has memory here and there. So I know where mom and dad are. I know where her parents are. But I don't know where the uncles and aunts and some of the extended family members are. So on this day, we go to the cemetery, and I'm saying, how am I going to get out of this one? Well, we go to her parents. I clean off the grave, the headstones. I put down the flowers. And then I said, what's next? She said, go to Aunt Laura and Uncle Albert. I said, where are they? She said, they're down there under the tree. So we got there. Sure enough, that's where they were. I cleaned them off. I put them there. She said, go to Jarvis. That would be my nephew. I said, where? She says, go down here. It's right over this little bridge. And we went over the bridge. And sure enough, he was there. 14 family members. She never missed one. And so I figured that I did a wow moment too. On the way out, I began to ask, I said, Mom, how did you remember all of this? She said to me, This is what my mother used to do for the family. She said, and the Bible says, honor your mother and your father, that your days may be long upon this earth in which the Lord thy God gives thee. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, so honor doesn't mean as long as they are alive. It means as long as you are alive. You should honor what they believed in and what their values are. I pulled out, then I turned back around. She said, where are you going? I said, I'm going back to make a map so I can honor you. And so I went back and I literally made a map because I still didn't know where everybody was. She had pointed them out to me. And to this day, I have a map. And I made copies. And I gave it to my siblings and I gave it to my children. And I said, you need to remember this. And they said, why? I said, because your mother said you needed to remember it. So care and end-of-life care is not a sad conversation as many people have thought it to be. It's not this traumatic experience. It is something that can be a very beautiful thing. It was a living experience that got me really better acquainted with the values of my mom and my dad. But I want to also pivot the conversation to congregations who provide this healthy atmosphere for this to take place. You see, I believe you have to have conversations about it from the pulpit, and you have to find ways to bring this into conversations that take place outside of the worship environment, into the home, and into other spaces where people congregate and gather. We really need to introduce this topic or this subject so that people will feel more comfortable and at ease having it across the table. Oftentimes we'll start on it and it becomes something that we don't want to talk about, but we have to have these types of conversations. And then we have to think, how do we also provide care for ourselves? I want to spend a little time on this because all too often we come to conferences like this and we find more strategies and we find better ways of doing this for everyone else. How many of you would admit that you could stand a little care for yourself sometime? Yeah. And the people who hold their hands way down here, like that lady right there, she needs a whole lot more than most of us. Because that's what we do, and I was the same way. I tell people I suffer from the worst case of SAD, seasonal affective disorder, around holidays. I can tell you that I lost loved ones on holidays, and I can tell you on Christmas I had one loved one to die. I had one to die on Thanksgiving. I had one to die on New Year's. These traumas. And so right around the holidays, I would get tense. I get very tense because I figure something is going to happen on the holiday. And so I tend to celebrate holidays or become a little bit more relaxed the day after the holiday. So I figure once the holiday ends, once the day ends, I'm in the clear. The problem is I'm a pastor of a church. You can't walk around tense on the holidays. When do people come to church? The CMEs, Christmas, Mother's Day, and Easter, all right? And Thanksgiving, right? And so you can't be frowned up, angry, and tense. You have to be able to really deliver the message and encourage people and give them hope. But my tenseness would come around the days of the holidays. So I had to pray about that. And then I had children. I didn't even want to play with them on Christmas. I just everybody get somewhere and sit down, and then we'll have a great Christmas on December 26th. I would have this very sad demeanor until I went to actually get the care and the counsel that I needed to be able to serve others effectively and have this great impact. When you are providing palliative care, counsel, end-of-life care for others, who talks to you? And better yet, who do you go and talk to? I would like to make sure that every person in here can identify at least one person of accountability that you can say, I can go and sit down and talk to this person. And husbands, it can't be your wives, and wives, it can't be your husbands, because what you're doing is transferring grief back and forth to each other that both of you are currently involved in and currently sharing. And so you have to find someone that you can do it. If you notice, there's this great paradigm of Scripture even when Mary and Martha are calling for Jesus, and Jesus comes to the community of faith where they are gathered, and Lazarus is already dead, and I don't have to preach to preachers, but if you look at it in the 37th verse of that, or 35th or 37th verse, I think, of John 10, it says Jesus wept. And right after that it says, and somebody went over and comforted him, right? No. Doesn't say that, does it? It says Jesus wept. But right after that, someone went over and criticized him for not showing up and said, if this one who has given sight to the blind and done all these other miracles, if he had been here, what? He wouldn't be dead. He had already gotten criticism from one of the sisters a few verses up. Where you been? Pastor, where are you? Pastor, hey, where are you? I'm at the hospital with my loved one. You're sending who? I don't want you to send anybody. I want you. So many days, I pastor a congregation of 5,000 people. I have a congregational care pastor, a care team. And so many days, what I hear is, where are you? Where are you? And all too often what happens is that we move in what I call the chain of grief, because we have been taught in seminary and other places that we don't heap grief upon another person. So I go and visit this hospital and I spend time with this family. But when I leave, I have another situation that I go and spend time with this family. But I don't tell this family that I just left this family, because I would be taking the grief of this family and applying it to this situation. And that's really not their number one priority. And on the way, I make a phone call to another family. And then I get a text that says another family's in need. And all between the hours of my congregational care that I've set aside, I maybe have seen 5 to 7 families, but none of the families know about the other family. And then, by the way, I go home to my family. And when I go home to my family, my child wants to tell me about his or her day, and I don't have time to hear it. I don't have the strength to hear it. I don't want to hear it, because I'm carrying the load of 5 to 7 families, if not more. And so who cares for you as you are caring for others? Because it is reported that over 1,500 pastors quit on a monthly basis or walk away from the work assignment, often because they don't have the coping strategies and care strategies needed to assist themselves. They know how to help everybody else, chaplain. They know how to help everybody else, pastor. But we don't know how to care for ourselves. So we come and learn strategies that apply to others, but I want us also to have a few takeaways that we apply to ourselves. And those are very important things. In this model towards the end of life, we have to surrender the Christ complex, right? How many of you are possessed with the Christ complex? Come on. We're going to pray everybody back to life, aren't we? Because that's what we're told to do. We're going to go in the room and everybody's going to be all right, right? No. Everybody's not going to be all right. Some of you have learned to read the meters as good as the nurse. You can see the screen that says what the blood pressure is, what the heart rate is. You can pick up on the stuff in the room. You can read it just as well as any clinical practitioner. And you pretty much know where this situation is headed. And because hope goes up when you walk in the room, you don't want to be the bummer, Debbie Downer. So you go in and tell everybody to close their eyes and hold hands. We're going to pray. We're going to pray for God's restoration, strength, and hope. We do everything short of saying, Lazarus, take up your bed. Lazarus, come forth. Rise, take up your bed, and walk. And then we even have a sense of defeat when we hear that things did not go as we had hoped they would. How long can you carry that and still be well yourself? What are some of the strategies you've seen or the things that you may be doing in your areas that can help us? And I think 45 years ought to have something to share with us. All excellent strategies. Trust factors are high markers for people in this form of work, ministry, pastoral care, chaplaincy, only because there's a complex that comes along with you being who you are, that you're supposed to be close to perfect. And the fact that you're not perfect, or the fact that you don't have all of the answers, when people find out that you don't, they really kind of say, you're no preacher, you're no clergyman, you're no chaplain. You're just like the rest of us. And I really am. I really am. Yeah, I'm just like you, as a matter of fact. Yeah, very good, very good. Let me say also, there are no two situations that are just alike. Two people, same age, diagnosed on the same day, two very alike situations, no two outcomes the same, no two family systems the same, no two faith walks the same. And so you can hear about all of these things, and you can be equipped to have a shell framework, but you're really filling in the blanks when you go into every situation. You are literally what I think the kids say, thinking on the dime or something like that. You know, you got to learn to be flexible in the moment and to be in communication with God at all times to hear what are the dynamics about this situation. Outside of just having the person in the ER, we needed to have language providers in our hospital who could communicate and who would help us to understand the cultural context and the background of people coming in who present, or people who are about to transition. There are just some things that you don't say to a Muslim or a Sikh or people who are at that particular point. And so we had to become very sensitive to that. If we're going to live in communities and we're going to receive all people, then we have to be sensitive and have the right, eliminate the language barriers and cultural competency, understand as much as possible. And then when it comes to just those who are in our community, people of color, African American, Hispanic, and or other who are there, we have to understand that by dealing with this family, relationships are built from the first time you see them and not at the moment of transition. So a part of what we are discovering across Tennessee right now in the nation, and Tennessee has latched onto it, Chattanooga has, is adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. Are you familiar with that term? Oftentimes grief leads to that, unprocessed grief, not dealing with it. I coined another phrase because I sit on that committee, meet with that group in Nashville, called adverse congregational experiences. Because what happens in congregations have personalities. A church is a living organism. Hospitals are living organisms. They are spaces and places. There's a culture, right? In the hospital, the sentinel moment takes place when something that goes wrong that could have been prevented, or something happens. You say, this was a 9-month term, 9-month pregnancy here. Everything should have happened well. What happened wrong? They gather and talk about it. In church, we don't. When something happens in church, we don't gather and talk about it. We don't sit down and talk about there are 18 deaths over the last 18 months. How did we feel? We don't have, and I'm thankful that there are resources that are being published and people are now doing great things. Hattie is doing things around a Bible study to give us opportunity to talk and to learn together. And you'd be surprised that when we're together, you hear something, you've heard something today already. Someone said something over here that someone over here said, didn't know that, or that, that wasn't an issue. So by having group therapy, so to speak, we're able to heal and we're able to process things and not feel alone. I don't know what to offer you in that moment, and I hope that you don't become desensitized by that. It's still your charge, it's still your call, and maybe the Lord sent you into this space for such a time as this to be able to get the skills because, and I often think sometimes, I've had this experience with people when I was brought on as pastor of a new church 20 years ago where I am now. There were people who rushed to me to tell me their story because they didn't want to leave the earth without having a pastor who would have a eulogy and words to speak into their life. The previous pastor had passed, and there was no pastor there. And there were people who rushed to tell me their story. Has anyone ever read the book Midlife Orphan? If you get a chance, jot it down. It's a great book. It's a resource to offer too. I'm reading it for like the 15th time. It's about people who are young like me, and you, and us, who have no parents left in the earth. Who knows your story? What was one of the best things your mom ever said to you? When you used to do this. I remember when. We speak life in churches and congregations and family, and we speak hope. But there is a common denominator that levels all of us, which is an afterlife, death that occurs to send us into that space. And so we have to have those conversations. And I think the lack of skilled and well-equipped communicators and people whom have not been properly trained or who don't give thought to it. I must say that even in my preparation and training for it, when it actually happened, when it moved into my own family, when it moved into my own home, when I saw it twice within a span of 24 months, when I cared for a mother who had a declining health disease and a father who had a disease that was diagnosed and his death occurred almost instantly thereafter, it was something that I had to be well prepared for from the son's perspective and not from the pastor's perspective or the hospitalist's perspective, where I occupy both seats. So it is something that we need to have adequate conversation and effective communication around.